In Kyushu, the powerful Sacho alliance tried many times to muster an army that could defeat the British, rallied by how close the Hirado had come. They found, though, not a beaten and tired British army, but a freshly reinforced one, led by officers with costly experience in fighting the clans. They had no chance. Meanwhile, the young Charles Alcock defied his orders to eat up the weakly garrisoned castles of Honshu's northwestern highroad. With such momentum, it is clear why some clans decided it was better not to fight. That's an awful cut if ever I saw one. No English tailor touched that. Nor even French, I would wager. Is that some Jap imitation? I believe so, sir. They wish to integrate themselves with us clearly, and an attempt at creating their own suits seems to be their modus operandi. Brings a tear to the eye for precisely the wrong reasons, this does. I suppose the sword is for me. That means the same thing as at home, I presume. Yes, even more actually. These samurai types would do much to avoid ever parting with their personal blade. It seems he is truly ours now, sir. Good, good. Well, tell him that we'll be needing a certain measure of resources from him as a show of sincerity. Let's say 2,000? No, they aren't some primitive tribe. We can make a more respectable demand. Perhaps in the region of 8,000? What was that sound he made? I think he knows the numbers, sir. I believe your suggestion has pained him, for if he cannot pay it, he will be obligated to take his own life. And by the look on his face, I think it is fair to say he cannot pay it. Oh fine, 5,000 will do. I won't have a mess made in the hall. That blasted jacket is affront enough for one day. Hello there, welcome back to Honourable Gentlemen. Right now in Kyushu, we're preparing for a new war with the Nabeshima. I decided that Joss and our elite army should go over to help with this, since the Sacho alliance don't really pose much of a threat right now, despite being a big faction, and we've got enough stuff to leave behind and defend the nearby river crossing there, to stop them attacking us while we're over here in this corner of the island. So we're going to move up Joss there to support George, and you can already see multiple Nabeshima armies are on the way. They're also going to be attacking our nearby coal mine. Inconvenient, but doesn't really matter, to be expected. Their armies are going to cluster together and look like they're going to attack us here, so something is on the cards. I'm going to swap George and Joss around so that our better troops are inside the castle in the event of a siege assault, since that's going to make life much easier, putting the cav outside to act as reinforcement so we can get a few garrison units as well. And indeed, the Nabeshima do come up to besiege us, but they're not going to go for a siege assault, and I think that's the right move from them. If they can force us to sally, that will be a much more even engagement, especially with all of their numbers. First though, we're going to look at the other battlefront, where we've got Charles Alcock being attacked by the Yonago that he has under siege, but we are being supported by Dorian Cartwright with a full stack of reinforcements, so things aren't going to be too difficult. This was probably an auto-resolvable battle, but I wanted to fight it in order to experiment with a new strategy. What I'm doing here is putting a few conscript units in front of the main line to act as breakwaters for the enemy. It's inspired by a classic AI exploit in Total War Warhammer, where the AI can't see units beyond the ones at the front of your army, and I believe it works in most of the Total Wars as well, so I thought I'd try it out here. And you can see it does the business. The enemy primarily attack those couple of units that you've put out in front of the army, and while they're under a lot of pressure, we have the rest of the army just a few paces behind who can now completely blast the enemy apart at close range and easily defeat many enemy units. There was a more substantial attack on the left where we didn't have conscripts to act as breakwaters and the cavalry hit our lines, but our dragoons will help us clear that up. Elsewhere, the infantry are falling for the same trap. All of these samurai running up towards our conscripts, and they just can't walk past them. They get stuck here, and now our men will just start shooting them, although there is one samurai in our ranks there. That's not too bad, could have been much worse. Over here their general does the same thing. He almost manages to get past our conscripts, but he then goes back and just fights them, and again he's going to get shot at point blank range. All what we like to see. The conscripts are of course in trouble, and I had to withdraw them pretty soon, but they've done the job. They've taken the brunt out of the enemy's assault. So now, even though they are pressing against our front line, and this unit doesn't really care that there's one guy slowly killing all of them, you can see on the balance bar that we're going to win virtually no matter what happens now. The advantage is too great. That said, on our right flank, all of Dorian Cartwright's troops were off fire at will for some reason, so they're actually just standing here looking at the enemy. Fortunately, the enemy weren't really firing back, so there were no major repercussions, but that was a bit strange. Just going to use my cav here to clear all of these units up. The replay actually crashed at that point, so here's the ending of the battle from the real footage. We blasted the enemy apart from this point, as you might expect, and our cavalry just annihilated everything as well. So it all went quite swimmingly, and the strategy of having a few units out in front was even more effective than I thought it was going to be. It does mean though that we lost one unit of conscripts because the casualties were so concentrated on those few units that we put out in front. So a very dangerous and ruthless strategy, but an effective one to know about. We're going to go right into another battle with the Yonaguni now, because John Alcock also had some of their men under siege, and they're sallying out. This time a more even battle, but still very straightforward. The enemy were initially advancing into this area full of trees and hills, and I was going to use this to try and have double lines so we can get more firepower on the enemy, but I realised that's going to be a real hassle because line of sight is going to be blocked all over the place, so I eventually thought, well, let's do this the easy way. We'll walk backwards. There was ideal terrain for our line at the back of the map, so we'll just sit there and shoot the enemy once they're in position. What have you been reading to make you think that was a good idea? Not something you've read. Charles? Not something you've read, sir. You know, the last man to challenge the depth of my reading was your father. He thought I didn't even know the latest theories on the Ice Ages. Truly fascinating, as if it would have passed me by. So tell me, lad, what was it? A manual, sir. A Japanese manual. Look. Oh, is that it? What? This is all in their pictograms. You understand this? A little, sir. I see you've written it plainly underneath. Ray, Day, 2? What's the meaning of that? You're saying it wrong. I don't doubt it. Well, whatever this is, you mustn't be using some half-understood primitive primer as the basis for real strategy. I can't bear to tell your father how many men were lost. Just tell him they were Japanese men. Charles, tell him they were damned Japs, sir, and he won't even look up from his paper. Oh my, I've got a lot of work to do with you. There wasn't much input required from us in this battle. Most of our men just stood in their position, fired at everything that walked in front of them, and that did the job. Took a bit of return fire, but still not much in the way of casualties. And as a result of that win, we are going to be able to take the settlement right away. So that's handy. Now John Alcock can go back to focusing on the front line to his east. With Charles, we're going to have to auto-resolve a few survivors from that last fight, but obviously no problems there. So that's another Yonaguni settlement taken. I think they've only got 2 or 3 more around the place, one of them being just to the east there. It's very unvaluable, has no economic worth, this place, but we should probably take it at some point just because it's so easy to attack. We are no longer completely choke-pointed after taking Hockey there, because now there is a route to the south we need to worry about. However, that route is not very heavily defended, so we can actually capture those territories and get things choke-pointed again further south, especially if John moves up at the same time, so I think we will achieve that soon enough. Now we're going to see our first proper naval battle. The Sacho had a fleet blocking the land crossing from Honshu to Kyushu, so I sent an armoured corvette and a frigate to try and clear this up. They've got 1 corvette and a whole load of gunboats, which aren't very powerful, but altogether they managed to balance the balance bar, although here in the battle we have the advantage, which I think is more accurate. You can see they formed up in a big line, just facing us, waiting for us to sail in front of them so they can shoot us, but we're just going to sail slightly around to the edge so they can't all shoot us at once. There's the armoured corvette that we brought from Britain, the only ship we started with, and a Japanese-style frigate, much bigger and with more guns, but also more vulnerable to enemy attacks because it's only made of wood. The enemy decided to attack us in the best possible way for us. They're going to send units at us one at a time, so that's all fine. You may note here in this battle that for some reason the animations on the guns aren't working, so you can't tell when they're firing. The shot just goes off and you can hear the sound effect, but there's no flash or anything like that, or no smoke. Not sure why that is, we'll just have to put up with it for now, might be able to fix it for future engagements. The first enemy gunboat sinks, as you can see, so that's a good start, and the second one takes so many shots that it actually just goes and explodes. I guess we got a critical hit on the engine. So 2 boats down, and now all we have to do is make the enemy send more boats at us. I think because our frigate has a very long range, the enemy are trying to close to range with us with ships that are aggroed into the fight, and the rest are still waiting for us to get closer. The end result is that things are going to be even easier than they first appeared. There's another gunboat being absolutely destroyed, and another one advances and sinks after too much shot hitting the hull. That's all good. Next, the corvette comes over to engage. This one's more sturdy, we can't just sink it by firing a couple of volleys at it, it's going to be more serious, and it's actually firing back in a more substantial manner. The rest of the gunboats then decided to cluster together and come at us as a single block, so I switched to explosive shot, which I effectively just realised I had in this battle, and fired at them, causing all sorts of crew damage and damage through the fires the explosives start on wooden ships, and since they're clustered in a block like that, the difficulty of hitting a small target is removed, so we did loads of damage and they all started surrendering and routing as the damage was done. Finally, it was just the corvette, and a few shots onto it started to bring it down. It started listing, so clearly it's going to sink. Then their masts just fall over, so that's not going to be helping them out. Not sure what caused that. I guess it was a bit of a fire damage, and they do surrender at this point with their ship not looking like it's in ideal condition, and that's going to be the end of that. So we've cleared away that fleet, which just allows us to move troops between Kyushu and Honshu again, restoring our lines of communication. We did take some damage on our frigate, but that'll be easy enough to repair. Now, the reason that fleet was able to get into that annoying position was that the navy I usually defend that crossing with was on its way over here to link up with Joss and George to help them out with the Nabeshima. Now that these ships are here, we're going to do an attack with Joss Arton against the force that's besieging us, and by making it a night attack, we fight a one-on-one battle with just one of the enemy's armies. And since Joss is a specialist in naval artillery techniques, the use of the fleet will give us absolutely loads of firepower with which to pound this enemy army and hopefully clear this siege up. Yeah, I thought you'd been chattering away over all that. Well, don't worry, I'm going to sort them out for you. Kind of a secret though, so maybe we better be alone before I blab about it. Oh, don't mind him, he's on the right side. He's just working on translating some captured missives. Although, between you and me, I'm not sure he even speaks Japanese. Good stuff. All going well in your camp then, eh? Anyway, I just need you to send up a little garrison to take care of the castle for the night, keep the lights on and all that. And I suppose you're off to save us all? Yep, been organising a little something with the floaties in the bay. Enemy are camped below a nice steep hill. If we pester them a bit tonight, they'll rush up there and sit there with the tongues out. But I've had the boys ranging and sighting the place all day. Bit of smoke to start the show, and the hillside will be turned into mud pie a la mode de samurai. You're far too happy about all this. Bah, they'd be screaming with delight if they could do the same to you. Grab yourself some earplugs and start thinking about what you'll make me for breakfast. The AI actually did a pretty good job of dodging my artillery, so it didn't inflict that much damage, even with loads of bombardments. However, they have decided to corner camp, and that's messed up their formation, so some of their units are right out in front of everything else, and we can just move up and destroy them as we advance towards their hill. And the enemy didn't want to then leave that part of their formation unmanned, so they started sending more units forwards to take up the position where a unit had just been destroyed. And obviously that means I just don't need to do anything. We can just cut down a few units before the battle really gets started. They did get a few return shots onto us, and the enemy are extremely accurate, I discovered in this battle. Even when they only fire 10 or 20 shots, they still get about 10 kills, so I think it's just the difficulty buffs enemy accuracy. Not that that's really going to make a difference here, because the amount of shots the enemy will get will be minimal in comparison to the absolute bombardment we are subjecting them to, using kneel fire, using light infantry where the whole unit can fire at once. We're just annihilating the enemy's right flank, and a similar thing eventually happened in the centre. As I started advancing up the hill, the enemy just came at us and got destroyed. The only thing holding us back here was the fact the enemy have set up all these defences from the start of the battle before they went up the hill, and now we're kind of stuck on them. I think this stops us using kneel fire and things like that properly, because all the pathfinding messes up in some way and the unit thinks it's still moving or something. But we didn't really need it, as it turned out. We destroyed them, just going to cut out all the rest of that. We destroyed every single unit, pretty much one at a time. There's the result. Killing 10 enemies for every man we lost, just what we liked to see, and the siege is now broken as a result of that win. Looks like our guard units and our light infantry doing particularly well in that fight. As you might imagine, they are the elite of our force. Now, if I wanted to be truly optimal here, I could move out and do the exact same thing to the other two armies, but because that would be particularly boring, and it does take a long time to actually go and do that, even if it is easy, I'm not going to bother with it in this case. We'll be sporting and see what the enemy do instead. The Sacho appear to be preparing for another attack, and they also still want peace with us, so a mixed message, but we will just continue the war and see if they do have anything to offer. The Nabeshima don't do very much. One army goes to do a raid, the other one just stands there paralysed with fear, so not much happening there. We'll still have to go after them. Now a quick naval battle when two Totori corvettes came to attack a frigate that I had scouting ahead for Charles. In this case, the enemy have more guns than us, so they sort of have an advantage in that respect, and as I advanced towards them, I took quite a lot of damage. I needed to advance because I'm going to use explosives on them, and explosive shots have a shorter range than regular shot. Once the explosives caused one ship to catch fire, now things will go back into our favour, because the crew of that first ship were busy trying to put the fires out and not firing back at us. When I fired on the second ship, it immediately surrendered, which was surprising. Maybe because it's stuck on the line, that somehow influences its morale mechanics? Not really sure. So that leaves just a one-on-one. Now we'll open fire on these guys who are still busy repairing the ship, so no chance for them to fire back. The muzzle flares still aren't working, so it's just like cannonballs are flung out of our boat towards theirs. And soon enough, the enemy do surrender, interestingly when they hit the red line as well, so maybe that is something to do with it. That's that battle won. Now back with the Nabeshima. Since they're just standing in front of us still, we're just going to attack them in the more traditional fashion. We'll get the armies we have nearby together and just go after them. And since these armies actually aren't very good, the enemy's armies that is, we are going to be able to stomp them here and open up the path to conquer the rest of northwestern Kyushu. Calling it a day already? Well, yeah, job's done. Done? I didn't even make it to the battlefield. Then train your men to march faster. You know, there is a concept of fair play that I must appeal to here. There's work aplenty for us, but you insist on having it all to yourself. Don't want to sound like a paper pusher, but that's because my orders are to advance. You're meant to be my rearguard. I did my job. Yes, but that was before I was promoted. And really, I think I've put in enough work in that regard. I'm still your senior, even in the same rank. I can order you to go stack shelves in the depot for the rest of the war, and have you sent home in rags if you don't. Oh, don't be like that, Mr. Arton. That's not true, for starters. And what would the Major General say of this lover's tiff? He'd tell you to stop complaining. Prefer my lovers with a slightly different build anyway. No offence. None taken. On that count, keep your chin up, mate. There's a whole island out there to conquer. I know you want to get your chops, but this sideshow's my business. You'll find your Jep gold yet, I know it. Your faith is most appreciated. Perhaps you'll vouch for my next loan. I don't write my name on anything that isn't a commission paper. Tell your mother the money can wait. Back on our eastern front, John Alcock is advancing up to attack the Matsuyama, who are now perilously undefended. They've got a few small armies just wandering around various places, but their territory seems to be empty, so the first of their few remaining castles will now fall to us without any trouble there. We're going to be surrounded again here after this capture because there are enemy territories to our north and south, the other two Matsuyama territories that we'll want to take as soon as possible, and also to our east are the Okayama, with not much in the way of military as far as we can see, but we will have to declare war on them regardless because of our rules, so I just need to get that set up, and we'll do some spying to see if they have anything else on the horizon. Hopefully they won't stop us from finishing off the Matsuyama here. Charles is going to be a very naughty boy and sneak out to attack Hockey Port here. There was almost nothing inside, so we can take that easy enough. And that now brings him up to the border with our new enemy, the Okayama, who actually have an army there, so might be a harder war for him to deal with. An interesting point that comes from taking that place is that now the Yonago only have one settlement, so we can vassalize them, and they agree to this deal. That theoretically secures the route from Hockey going to the south, since the Yonago are occupying it there, as you can see. So I'm going to leave that border unattended and hope that our vassal will keep it clear of enemy forces. Bit of spying reveals there's not much from the Okayama in that area, so hopefully they'll be able to do that. And this means that Dorian can return to chase down Charles and make sure that he is behaving himself and staying alive, more importantly. The Sancho Alliance don't attack me, as I thought they might. Their force on our border walks away. Perhaps they're just joining up with the nearby army to attack in greater force, or maybe they don't want to attack us anymore. The Nabeshima army actually bypasses our main force and attacks the castle behind us. That was pretty sneaky. I didn't even consider that as a possibility. The zones of control in this mod are much smaller than they are normally, so you can walk past armies more easily. So now we have to fight this castle defence, but we left quite a lot of stuff behind when the main force moved out, so we do have a substantial garrison. The main threat from the enemy was actually this unit here, their sharpshooters, who could snipe my men off the walls, but they didn't do that. They sent them in for a melee attack. My police there, not really concerned by them, not even bothering to fight with them. So the vague strategy is a familiar one. We'll let the enemy in, fall back from the walls, and then try and shoot them. There were some issues because lots of my men didn't really want to shoot, as you can see here. These conscripts pulling their weight as ever and putting on a good show, while these garrison infantry just kind of watch. It was successful in the end though. We defeated multiple enemy units coming over the wall in the north here. More units just waiting to be shot as they try and form up in front of our gunners. That's not going to go well for them. They also attacked in the southeast, and it's very much the same sort of thing. This attack was more successful. They had more infantry and I did less damage to them as they came in. But still, once inside, we'll start blasting, inflicting tons of casualties, and the enemy's morale is going to be annihilated by attacks such as these. And we have so many reserves that even if they make a successful charge and get through our gunfire, we'll beat them in melee. Unfortunately, the replay actually just glitched out at this point. I think it was getting bored of seeing me just cutting the enemy down, but I'll assure you that we did win, and here's the eventual result. We lost really pretty much nothing in exchange for defeating that whole enemy army. So the Nabeshima are now in huge trouble. They've got pretty much nothing left after losing 3 stacks so quickly to us. With that in mind, I'm actually going to advance with just Joss. We're not going to have George support him on this attack because it's not required and it's just not sporting. We lay siege to this castle after a nearby enemy force retreats into it. Lots of monks in that force apparently, so that's interesting. We won't go for an attack right now. The enemy may well sally. Although that said, they don't have much in the way of reinforcements. I thought maybe we could draw everything up to fight them in that choke point, but they don't have much to draw up. Anyway, we'll just have to see what happens there. And as for George Hook, he's going to first defeat the survivors from that castle battle, so everything is cleaned up on our back lines, and now he's going to go over to the east to take up position on our defensive line that hasn't been really tested recently, but could use reinforcing, especially on the eastern part of the island, where we've actually got very little and the enemy just haven't realised they can walk right in there. And if they continue not to realise that, then of course we'll be able to go on the offensive and finally start securing Kyushu. That is it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to the Officially Devin patrons. Since things are going quite well at the moment, I think I'll enhance the challenge run rules to draw all of Japan into this war in the next episode of Honourable Gentlemen.